Winning a government contract often involves delegating certain tasks to another business. But here's the thing, subcontracts under government contracts have unique challenges. So in today's video, we're going to unveil the essential elements of a subcontract so that you can thrive as a government contractor by leveraging another business's expertise. So let's break it down and let's start at the beginning. Subcontracting is when a company known as the prime contractor hires another company known as the subcontractor to perform certain tasks to help fulfill the requirements of a contract. The subcontract is the written agreement between the prime contractor and the subcontractor. So let's go over the essential elements to include in your subcontract, starting with payment terms. Your contract with the government will specify how and when you will be paid. So align the timing and conditions of your payments to your subcontractor with the payment provisions in your government contract. First, any subcontract should require the subcontractor to invoice regularly. I always required monthly invoices and specify the exact procedure and schedule for the subcontractor to submit invoices to you. For example, let's say you want to submit your invoice to the government 5 days after the end of the month. You might require your subcontractor to submit its invoice to you by the first day of the month. If the government requires you to submit documentation with your invoice, such as time cards and receipts, then require your subcontractor to submit those documents to you. And be sure to pick an invoicing schedule so that you have sufficient time to review your subcontractor's invoice and include their documentation in your invoice to the government. And specify when the subcontractor will be paid. For example, you could insert a pay when paid clause that says you will pay the subcontractor's invoice within, say, 10 days of receiving payment from the government for the subcontractor's work. Next, be precise in defining the specific tasks, deliverables, due dates, and quality standards required. And to do this, I recommend starting with the statement of work in your government contract. It's the piece of your contract that specifies the work to be performed. Note that this goes by different names in different contracts. So in your contract, you may see it called the Performance Work Statement, or PWS. So find that piece of your contract and use it as a foundation for writing the scope of work to be performed by your subcontractor. And be specific about the work the subcontractor is responsible for, so there's no question about who's doing what, and so that you can hold them accountable for their performance. You'll also want the right to review and replace subcontractor employees. For example, on a services contract, you'll typically specify the qualifications required for the subcontractor employees. This is usually stated in terms of required years of experience and education. You'll want the right to review the subcontractor employees that are proposed to fill different positions and replace any individuals that don't meet the qualifications or aren't performing adequately. Next, make sure to specify deliverables and their due dates. Government contracts often require detailed reporting and documentation, such as progress reports, quality control documentation, and certifications of compliance. These are things that you, as the prime contractor, may be required to submit to the government. Make sure your subcontractor provides you with the information you need to comply with the reporting requirements of your contract. For example, say you've hired the subcontractor to write a report that's due to the government on June 1st. You might require that they submit the report to you on May 1st. That gives you time to review it and then submit it to the government by the due date. Also, pass down to your subcontractor any record-keeping requirements from the government. For example, subcontractors may be required to create and maintain financial records, personnel records, and quality documentation. Security requirements are another thing to include in your subcontracts. For example, your contract with the government might require employee background checks or have badging requirements. Make sure you pass these requirements on to your subcontractor. And your government contract might contain non-disclosure requirements. Include confidentiality and non-disclosure requirements in the subcontract to safeguard sensitive information you share during the subcontract and also to meet your government contract obligations. And take a close look at the insurance requirements in your contract and pass those down to your subcontractors as needed. 3 other critical clauses to include in a subcontract are a changes clause, a dispute resolution clause, and a termination clause. One thing to know about government contracts often undergo change orders or modifications. The government could ask for additional work or request a change to the schedule. In my experience, changes happen often, so it's important for the subcontract to address how changes will be handled. And many government contracts are issued with options. For example, let's say the government contract is issued with an option for a 1-year extension, meaning the government has the right to extend the contract for 1 year. So maybe you want to put in the subcontract that it is automatically extended when the government exercises an option. That way, you can just move forward without having to stop and renegotiate. And I know we like to think everything will go perfectly, but the fact is, sometimes government contracts get terminated for reasons that have nothing at all to do with us or our performance. You'll find that your government contract includes a termination for convenience clause, which means the government has a right to terminate your contract at any time. That's one of the reasons why it's essential to include a termination clause in the subcontract. Next, let's talk about mandatory flow-down clauses. When you sign a contract with a government agency, there are certain rules, terms, and conditions you need to follow. But here's the thing. The subcontractor you hire also needs to follow those rules, and that's where flow-down clauses come in. They're a way of passing down the rules and requirements from your contract with the government to your subcontractor. Your contract will include mandatory flow-down clauses that the government requires to be included in every subcontract. Mandatory flow-down clauses include contract cost and accounting clauses, such as the audit clause, labor clauses, such as the Equal Employment Opportunity Clause, ethics clauses, such as the Contractor Code of Business Ethics, and certain data rights clauses. The mandatory flow-down clauses can vary depending on the value or duration of the subcontract. Often, you'll see these clauses listed by their clause number and incorporated by reference, rather than including the full text of the clause. Oh, and one last thing. Be sure to comply with any requirements in your government contract relating to subcontracting. For example, some government contracts require consent to subcontract. If yours does, be sure to obtain written consent from the government contracting officer before you issue the subcontract. Hey friends, I hope this video has helped demystify subcontracting and given you confidence about the path forward as you seek out teaming partners for your contract bids. To learn all the details on subcontracting, check out this video, and I'll see you next time.